Welcome everybody, and I'm going to do a quick intro for you, Bart, and welcome to our MemoryFox webinar series. And my name is Celine Krzan, and I am here. I am part of the MemoryFox team, and MemoryFox is a tool really built for storytelling for nonprofits. But what we love to do is really bring our community together and bring you experts and practitioners from the field who can give you best practices and learnings as you are out there delivering the content and really doing the work that we all need for our communities. Now, a little bit about Bart, and Bart is here wrapping up our Planuary, and he is talking about curating content. And I just want to give you a little bit of background on Bart because he is brilliant. Bart is the founder and president of Caylor Solutions. He has a 30-year background in design, marketing, and development with corporate education and nonprofit clients. He now focuses entirely on marketing for education and higher ed. He's an Anderson University graduate. He lives with his family in Indiana. We were just talking about his wonderful kids. And he is really passionate about putting content together, and he's an expert in this field. He's here for us for the next hour. He's going to be presenting how to curate content and allow us to really dig in. What we ask of you is feel free to come on camera, but this is also your time to ask Bart questions. Drop them in the chat. You'll have Carly and I from your MemoryFox team, and we'll be able to facilitate those questions for you with Bart, and he's happy to answer those questions. But Bart, take it away. We are thrilled to have you.
Great. Thanks, Celine. Thanks for everybody for joining us today. And those who maybe are catching this later in the recording, really appreciate it. And the very last slide, you'll have my contact information if you want to follow up afterwards. But I will kind of give you some context. Even though I'm going to be presenting a lot of this from maybe a higher education standpoint, I have experience, as Celine said, in corporate, worked with Motorola, RCA.com, worked with a lot of nonprofits over my years. And so a lot of what I'm going to tell you today is not only for higher education, but that's probably the lens I'm looking at it through, is kind of presenting some of those things. But at the same time, I think that anybody that's doing anything in advancement, in nonprofit fundraising, and whatever you might be doing, I think it's going to apply, across the board here. So let's go ahead and just kind of jump in here, and I'm going to give you a little bit of context here. So 1994, I was 24 years old. 2 years into my career, and I was at a press check. So I'm a print designer by background. My training was in graphic design. And so I'm at a press check in the middle of the night with the boss of my company, the owner of Krzan's Design in Dayton, Ohio. And we're at a press check, and we're just chatting about things. And I had been going to Wright State University while my wife was doing her graduate work, and we were, while she would study, I would be, they had this thing called the World Wide Web connected to their card catalog. And so I would go and I would just kind of explore different places. I mean, back then you were surfing the internet. And so I would go to websites like NBC.com had a site, and, Saturn, I had a Saturn car. So I was always interested in that website. And there was this little bookstore called Amazon.com, which I thought was really kind of cool. And so that evening I was telling Rob about all these things. And I said, I really think that this website could be something that designers and marketers and everybody could really start doing. We need to probably start thinking about that. And he assured me that it was a fad, that he had seen these things come and go, and that really wasn't going to amount to much. He was wrong, obviously, but I think he had admitted as much, because a couple months later he came in and slapped me on the back and said, "Hey, I sold one of those web things you want to do." And I was like, "I don't know how to do it." And long story short, 6 months later, we had about a 14-page website for a corporation in Dayton, Ohio. But just to kind of give you some context, let me show you a video clip from the Today Show from 1994, just to kind of give you an idea of what the world was like.
Back now at 56 past, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Mm-hmm. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it. I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard around big fight up in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that
massive computer network.
The one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly. What does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a computer billboard.
It's not in it. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide. And it's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It came in really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie, and I've been
talking. But you don't need that. You don't need a phone line to operate internet. No.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a dating myself, I should say. But that's kind of what things were going like. And it was like this idea of what are we going to do with all this and how is it going to change? And it's so funny to hear them talk about, well, I don't want to do that and all these things. But it changes and things continue to change. And so one of the things that I want to kind of lead with is this great quote from Alvin Toffler. His quote says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." I think that's so important because so many times we think about illiteracy in context of reading and writing. But in our century, it's going to be the people who cannot learn something, unlearn it, and then relearn it. And so many times I like to tell you that when I'm presenting this stuff, I mean, we're talking about content, we're talking about digital marketing, different things like that. There might be some things today that I might mention that in a year from now, I might say, you know what I told you last year in the MemoryFox, and I showed you that little digital marketing tip. Don't do that anymore because it's not relevant anymore. Do this instead. And so it's that idea that I might teach you something today, but I'm going to ask you to unlearn it later so we can relearn it together. And so that's just a disclaimer that I give at the beginning of these webinars, because when we talk about things on the internet, about digital marketing, about leveraging all of this, it's so easy to change sometimes. And that's why you really need to have some tools in place that are going to help you manage all that change. Now, when it comes down to, again, I'm going to do this from a little bit of a perspective of a higher ed marketing, but I think this applies to just about any of you that might be doing fundraising or other things. So I kind of see that digital marketing especially is kind of the idea of having this three-legged stool. You've got to have an enrollment-focused website. So that for college, that's a website that's focused on getting students into the college. Now, if you're running a advancement area of the higher ed college, then that portion of the website should be giving focused. You want to make you want to make your donors the hero. And so same with your students who are coming in. Enrollment focus simply means making them the hero of the story so that they can understand, they can take the next steps in the funnel, whether that's enrolling at your school, whether it's making a gift, whether it's a nonprofit where you're asking for gifts or volunteers or whatever else. The person that's viewing it, the user, needs to be the hero. And so focusing that on them. Once you have that website, you also need to have content. So the content is going to be user focused again, and it's going to answer the questions. And we're going to get into a lot of that today. And then the third part of this stool is that you want to have a lead generation strategy that drives prospective students, influencers, donors, whatever you want to fill in there, your audience, drives them back to the website, drives them to your content so they can take the next action. If that's, find out more information about your school, apply, schedule a visit, make a donation, schedule for a recurring gift, those types of things. But you've got to have those three things: a website that works, content that's feeding the website, and a lead generation strategy. That could be everything from search engine optimization to paying for clicks to a direct mail campaign. There's a lot of ways to drive people back to the website and to your content. So I just skipped like the entire thing. Let me get back here.
Back now at 56 past.
Sorry about that. Okay, so first we're going to get into content, and I kind of consider this the fuel for all of your marketing efforts. I posted something today on LinkedIn. I really think that with content is going to become even more critical over these next couple of years, because I'm not going to get into it today, but ChatGPT and several other artificial intelligence engines that are really picking up steam. ChatGPT was the quickest platform of any technology to go to, I think, a million or 100 million users. It was like, did it in hours. This is going to change things. And part of what these artificial intelligence engines rely on is content. They are going out and basically looking at the whole of the humanities knowledge on the internet and building these answers back with that. Well, content is going to drive that. And so content is going to continue to be important for whoever you are, your organization. So content is going to be an area that we need to continue to feed because it's going to fuel everything in the future and today for your marketing. So just to kind of give you a few facts here, and this is a great quote. I'm going to sprinkle in some quotes from marketing experts. This happens to be Seth Godin, who's really one of the leading thinkers in marketing today. Content marketing is all the marketing that's left. So if you think about that, you think about the idea that, okay, you've got one of the leading marketers saying, content marketing is really all that's left. I mean, we've kind of emptied the barrel on everything else. Content's all that is left. And I would make the argument that content is the most powerful thing that there is moving forward. 93% of all online interactions start with a search engine, and Google owns 92% of that globally. So you think about it, every time a browser is opened, 9 times out of 10, it's starting with a search. So content is going to help us get to the top of those search results for the words that people are looking for the answers that people are asking. And knowing that Google owns 92% of that basically means that 9 times out of 10 people are starting on Google whenever they open their computer. So keep that in mind when we're developing content. You know, Jay Baer is the author of the book Utility, and Troy Singer's here in the audience, and he and I have a podcast called The Higher Ed Marketer. And Jay was a guest on The Higher Ed Marketer, early in this last year, and he has a great book called Utility. He has several books out that I would recommend if you do any kind of marketing, grab them and read them. But one of his quotes that I really love is that useful marketing is providing answers to nearly every question a customer could conceivably ask before they think to ask it. And again, don't get hung up on words like customers and things like that. We're talking about anybody that is in a stakeholder that's in your orbit. We want to make sure that we provide the answers to nearly every question that they might have about your school, about your nonprofit, about your organization before they even think to ask it. Another good thing about content is that content makes you and your organization the authority on whatever you choose to publish. So let me kind of give you an idea here. So this is an example of a blog post that I did probably 2014, because it's got my old logo and my old website. It's a pretty old one. Basically what happened is I came across a piece of data online. It was from a study that was done by a company called Uversity and a textbook company called Chegg. So this was a higher education study. They interviewed several prospective students and asked them about web and social media. I thought it was a great study, and I just thought, it'd be great to kind of turn that into an infographic and just present that study. And so that first paragraph, you can't read it here, but it basically says, we recently came across a study from Uversity and Chegg, and I have a hyperlink to the study right there in the first paragraph. And I said, we thought it might be helpful to kind of take some of the findings and put it into an infographic to just consume, be an easier way to consume it. That was a blog post. I put that on my blog, made it available for everyone, didn't think much about it. A couple months later, or maybe a year later, I was doing a vanity search. And if you don't do those, I would encourage you to do those. The idea that you basically search your organization's name on Google and just see what's on there, what's linking to it, what people are saying. So I did this vanity search for Caylor Solutions, and I came across this book and that I've never heard of. It's called Blending Leadership: 6 Simple Beliefs for Leading Online and Off. It's 2 authors there, Valentine and Richards, and it came up in my search results, and I had been footnoted in the book. And so I bought the book on Amazon. And so I found the footnote, and on page 53, they're talking about, blended leaders design spaces and care for spaces. So they're talking about spaces. Well, this is what they quoted. They said, college admissions provides a good example. If you were charged with selling a college to prospective student body, you would assume your greatest asset would be the campus itself, manicured lawns, student spaces, et cetera. Yet Caylor Solutions recently released a summary of some key points from a student survey conducted with the users of Chegg, an online textbook provider, and Uversity, a higher education data and communications platform. Here's what they found. 79% of students reported they would drop a school from consideration if their experience on the school's website did not meet their standards. And 97% of the students surveyed reported they consumed these websites via mobile devices. So again, you can see Caylor 2014. What's fascinating to me about that is that while they referenced Chegg, while they referenced Uversity, I got the footnote. I became the authority. I was the one that said, yet Caylor Solutions recently released a summary. Chegg and University, I feel bad about this, but they spent a lot of money on this study. They invested a lot of time, but yet because I presented the content in a way that was consumable, and whether you think it's fair or not, somehow Google decided that I was the authority on that because of links, all kinds of, algorithms or whatever. I ended up getting the #1 spot on Google, and I ended up being the one that they referenced and quoted. That made me the authority on that subject matter. That's my point. You can become the subject matter expert on whatever you choose to do, as long as you focus on that and you produce enough content. When you do produce that content, you've got to keep in mind that you want content that's what I call evergreen. So evergreen content can provide you with search engine marketing, and I call it juice, for years to come, simply by answering the questions without time constraints. So if you think about it, how many of us put together content on our blogs or on our website? Maybe it's called news and events, where we feature the Christmas dinner, or we feature the, something that happened at homecoming, or there's an event that we're highlighting, or a piece of news that, it's a very small snippet in time. Well, that's going to be irrelevant in another month, in another 2 years, another 3 years. But you know what? My blog has content from 8 years ago that's still showing up relevant and showing up in the top of Google, because it's evergreen content. It's marketing basics. It's information that I know that my prospective readers are wanting to read. It's answering those questions that they have. And so I would encourage you, as you put together a content strategy, as you start to collect the stories, as you collect different things, make sure you're not putting a time constraint in it. Make sure that you're not asking, tell us about your experience on, January 31st, 2023. Just tell them about your experience that you had with our organization. That way it's freed from the constraint of time and space, and it becomes evergreen, and it can be used for years to come. And so that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind when you're putting this content strategy together. This is a good example of what I would call evergreen content. When I was a kid, my great uncle gave me his postcard collection. So he and my great aunt, they didn't have any kids, and so in the 40s, they spent a lot of their time just road tripping around the United States. And so everywhere that he would go, he would get a postcard, and he just added it to a collection. And so I literally have stacks and stacks and stacks of postcards from all around the country from the 40s and 50s. And all the postcards, it's like the Howard Johnson with the picture of the hotel on the front, and on the back it's got their address, and and so they're all very much the same. You might have a postcard from Mount Rushmore, and it's got the drawing of Mount Rushmore, and something from Hello from South Dakota on the back. But what's different is, as I was going through these, in the last couple of years, this one caught my eye, and I was like, okay, this Canary Cottage Cafe, it's in Tuscaloosa, Iowa, and it's a great piece of evergreen content, because it's no longer there. I actually did a blog post about this, where I actually took a picture from Google Maps of what's currently at the Canary Cottage Cafe in Tuscaloosa, Iowa. And it's not a cafe. I think it's like a computer store or something. But anyway, I love the postcard because it says Canary Cottage is located at 207 High Avenue East in Tuscaloosa, Iowa. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner served, except Monday. Closed the first 2 weeks of August. Turn off of US 63 and State Road 92 at Greens Ford's Garage, and go 1 block south and 1/2 block east. So I know how to get there. I'm not sure I could use those anymore. Those directions are not evergreen, because I'm guessing Greens Ford Garage is gone. But what I like about this is I could still go and make this chocolate fudge cake with the fudge frosting. That hasn't changed in nearly 100 years. We're coming up on 80 years from probably when this postcard was created. This is a piece of content that back in the day, if they were, you get a postcard in the mail from a family or friend that was traveling, they checking in, just letting you know what's going on, because days before cell phones, days before, being able to just ring somebody up, they would send postcards. Well, a lot of times you might just kind of read the postcard. Okay, I love how that is. Maybe, hold on to it for a few weeks, but you would get rid of it. It's a correspondence that would not have any value necessarily. But This postcard, even if the correspondence wasn't of much value, this recipe might be of value. It might end up in a recipe box. It might end up on the refrigerator. It might be passed down because it has evergreen content. It's never going to change. You can still read it and you can still get a value out of it. And so think about this as you're putting your content together, and kind of stop and think, how can I make sure that this content is evergreen? Ann Handley is an author of Everybody Writes, and that's a great primer of a book for you to read as you kind of think about your content marketing and how to better represent your content through writing on your website and in your materials. And by the way, Ann is going to be a guest on the Higher Ed Marketer podcast. Just a secret for all of you, because you're here. She's going to be on episode 100. And as a matter of fact, Troy and I are going to be interviewing her tomorrow morning. And so she's got some great things, but I love this quote: make your customers the hero of your stories. And it goes back to what I said at the very beginning, is how can you reframe a lot of what you're doing in your content to make them the heroes of the story? A donor doesn't want to necessarily give to your organization because your organization needs it. They want to give because what they feel inside when they do give, what allows them the gift of giving and what that does for them. That's why they engage with you and why they engage with your organizations. And so really making sure that your customers, whether it's students, whether it's donors, whether it's, whoever your stakeholder is, making them the hero of the stories will help your content go a long way. A couple more stats that I want to, kind of show you about content. Video is the most used content format, with nearly 60% of marketers that perform content marketing are using video. So that comes from HubSpot. So that's one of the things that I love about MemoryFox, is that there's a great way to capture video quickly. And so the idea that we have a way to really start building those stories, making the consumer or the user of the website or of the content the hero, and then using video to kind of explain that and to show that and to illustrate that, is a really powerful way, especially when we talk about all the generations. I think all the generations respond well to video, but especially millennials, Generation Z, and the upcoming Generation Alpha are going to respond very well to video. They want to see that more than anything else. And so keep that in mind as you're putting together your content strategy. It's not just copywriting. It can be rich content. It can be video. It can be audio podcasts. It can be infographics, can be illustrations. There's a ton of ways to do rich media, rich content, and don't miss the opportunity to really use some of the ones that are most effective. And I can go into, I'm not going to do it now, but there's a whole nother way of thinking about video. Don't get trapped in thinking that, well, we can't afford video because, 10 years ago we did it, and, we used the local television station and we paid, $15,000 for it. What you have now on your phone, in your pocket or your purse, this camera is more powerful than the broadcast studios that we had, 10 years ago. So, go to Amazon, get a little tripod holder, get a little lavalier mic that plugs into the port. For about $20, you can get what you need to really do some decent video. If you want more tips on that, I've got an ebook that I've done on marketing on a shoestring budget that goes into some of the tools that you can use. I'm not going to get into that today, but those are some of the things that you can do, because there's a lot of power here. And if you know how to use it and do it right, you can really get a lot of great content out of that. Thrive Agency had a really good piece of content here. The more quality content is published, the more you are seen as a trusted resource. It goes back to what I said earlier about the authority. As your trust grows, you can more easily convert your leads into customers. And so again, don't be scared of the lead customer. Think about, you can more easily convert, those small donors into large donors. You can create the one-time gifts into recurring gifts. You can, turn the RFI into an applicant into a matriculated student. So that quality content is going to help you build that trust. And once that trust gets built, you can earn it. And one of my biggest pet peeves, if you've been around me anytime, Troy's probably going to roll his eyes, but you'll hear me say, one of my biggest pet peeves is college websites that have the first call to action is apply now. And if you think about it, you're asking a complete stranger for a very large commitment. it's like walking up to somebody on the street and saying, will you marry me? Dropping to your knee and say, will you marry me? No, they're not going to marry you. No, they're not going to do it the first time you come up and ask. We have to woo, we have to persuade, we have to build relationships with those prospects, whether they're prospective donors, whether they're prospective students, however we want to talk about the stakeholders, we have to build that trust. And I think that this quote really gets into that, is that, when we build content is another way of building trust. It's another way to build relationship. And so I'd really like to challenge you to kind of think about that as you start to put together that content plan for this year. Another great quote from Guy Kawasaki. We start to get in a little bit into social media. So now that you're starting to generate your content and using your content, one of the ways that you can use that is through the lead generation of social media to drive people back to your website and your engagement. So Guy Kawasaki says at its foundation, social media is simple. If you share good stuff, people will reshare it, and you will get more interaction and more followers. So let's look at the way that we can leverage those people that are already within, those stakeholders that are already within our circles, whether if you're at a school, current students, influencers, faculty, staff, figure out how they can, how you can, create messaging that is very easy for them to be able to, turn into their own story and talk about it. It's kind of like the Saturday morning grocery test that I do. It's like, if I'm at a college and I'm wearing my, college sweatshirt in line at the grocery store on Saturday morning, and a family looks at me and says, "Oh, I've heard about that school. What do you know about it?" That they're able to articulate the benefits of that institution because they work there very quickly and articulately, and they can put their story around it themselves, rather than going into, something about, I'm a professor here and this is what I do, and make it more about that. So the idea of figuring out how can you not only teach your stakeholders internally to do that, but also give them a way that they can start sharing content themselves through social media, through whatever channels that you are encouraging them to do. So just a couple little small facts here about social media. This was done, the Pew Research Center this year. Talked a little bit about, the social media rise. So, since 2014, 15, TikTok's risen. I don't think there's any surprise there for anybody. It wasn't even around until 2014. Facebook has dropped. Instagram, and this is for higher ed students. Some of you might be saying, hey, we're living the dream in Facebook right now because we're a nonprofit and that's where all of our audience is. Understand that. But this is for students. But the thing I really want you to see more than anything, very top up there, 95% of US teens are in YouTube. People don't think about that as a social media network, but YouTube is a great place to put your content, especially video content. And if you're gathering stories, if you're gathering different elements, make sure you utilize YouTube to do those types of things. So I see we've got a question here.
Yes, Bart. So we have a question from Jenny. It says, how do you prioritize different content channels for your nonprofit?
That's a really good question, Jenny. I would probably say, take a look at your channels and figure out what are the watering holes for your ideal engagement. So let's say that we're looking at donors. Where are the watering holes for your donors? Is it on Facebook? If it is, then I would prioritize that. Is it at a community center or at a church? Is it a physical location? Well, then maybe we need to put the content into a physical form of, a newsletter or a magazine or a newspaper, and we put it in that physical location. A lot of it's going to depend on the generation. I mean, are they boomers? Are they Xers? Because each generation has a different preference for the way that they want to consume that content. If you Generation Z and boomers, believe it or not, consume similar content. They both like to have paper. There's a lot of studies now that Generation Z is kind of a resurgence into paper because it's nostalgic. I mean, if you think about it, most of Generation Z has never licked a stamp. They don't really know what it's like to get mail. And so the idea that they would get something in the mail, especially something unique like a newspaper or an oversized postcard or a dimensional item, that's going to be something that's going to, perk them up. But I think getting back to your point, I would really look to figure out where is your ideal consumer, donor, or whatever you want to call it. Where are they? Where's that watering hole? And then figure out what kind of content and prioritize that. So you're going to have a modality of Is it print? Is it digital? Is it, whatever it might be? That's how I would probably prioritize it. So if that doesn't answer your question, okay, got a thumbs up. So we're good. Okay. I'm going to keep moving on. So when we get to, again, this is higher ed focused, but Generation Z users are increasingly turning to TikTok instead of Google as their primary search engine. And I've had some schools kind of call me in a panic to say, what do we need to do? Everybody's going to TikTok, and no one's yet going to TikTok. This is some things that there's some trends that are bubbling up. People are starting to see things, but I wouldn't abandon your Google strategy right now for TikTok, but just be aware of what's going on. Start understanding these different platforms, start understanding TikTok. If you don't understand it, get an account, just kind of start flipping through it and watching it. I mean, that's how I learn a lot of things is if I don't know what it is, I sign up and just start playing with it. And I would say that's the best way to learn, learn and then unlearn and then relearn is to play with things. Again, back to Jay's quote, success flows to organizations that inform, not the organizations that promote. So if you've been kind of stuck in a hamster wheel of promotion, maybe your board says, hey, we need to see some billboards up around town and we need to do this. Stop for a second and think, okay, is another, $10,000 billboard buy gonna get us where we need to go versus creating content that's really going to inform our stakeholders to move them to the next funnel of next place in the funnel. And so, so really kind of think about that as you do that. And again, this book Utility is all about how are we doing things? How are we figuring out the questions our stakeholders have and providing them the answers through content? And a lot of times that's a blog content. And just a quick, idea for you. And I don't care if you're a college or university or a nonprofit, I think this applies. One of the things that you can do is you can sit down with your team. Maybe you grab lunch on Friday and you say, guys, we're going to have lunch here, but we're going to work for our lunch. And we're going to, for the next 20 minutes, I want you to come up with the top 50 questions people ask about our organization, our college, our soup kitchen, whatever it is. Figure out what are the top 50 questions people ask. It could be specifically about your organization. It could be about, are you a 501c3? Are you a, what do you do with this? What's your operating expense? Whatever those questions might be, your team can come up with the 50 questions pretty quickly. Write them all down in that 20 minutes. Then I want you to stop and take a look at them. And I want you to then flip it. And you're going to write a 750-word essay answering each one of those questions. And then you're going to go to Google keyword research and you're going to do a little bit of keyword research or find somebody on Fiverr.com that can do a little bit of keyword research for you around those questions. And so you're going to have a little bit of keywords in that. You're going to pepper that into for some search engine optimized content. And then you're going to use a WordPress blog and you're going to schedule one blog post for the next year. You just had a year's worth of content that is ready for Google. It's going to be around a subject matter expert of whatever your nonprofit is. And you're going to have plenty of fuel to start driving people to your website from Google. And so that's the power of content marketing. That's something I've been doing for 8 years. I've been answering the questions that my prospective clients have. And we, every half year, I meet with my ghostwriters, my team, and I say, what's hot right now? What are people asking about? So, we've got articles coming up about ChatGPT. We've got articles coming up about, the cookie cliff and people, not using cookies anymore on Google. We've got, the demographic cliff articles coming up. And so that's a lot of things that you want to kind of focus on, and your team can do that. Where to order lunch from? That's a good question. I kind of like pizza sometimes, so that would be my vote. So let's go. I'm going to show you a couple videos here, some expert opinions from some guests that we've had on the Higher Ed Marketer podcast. This first one is Biola University from Lee Wilhite. He's the Vice President of Enrollment and Marketing at Biola in Los Angeles. And he's got some great comments about, content and peer content.
And more students, especially in these younger generations, are looking for more peer input. They're looking for, maybe it's our shopping habits. We go to Amazon and we're looking at those customer reviews. We're trying to see more of a first person kind of assessment of how people are experiencing a product or service or those kinds of things. And we just saw an opportunity years ago of the power of a student to student communication stream. And so when you look at someone like Zach, who everyone can relate to, and then you look at some of our students enrolled at Biola today. You know, it's that that peer-to-peer, reflection, firsthand account of their experience at Biola. The trust level is higher. Somehow it feels to like cut through some of the corporate speak or university speak, if you will, and it really does, connect people more to peer level. And I think it's more of a trusted relationship.
So the thing I want you to keep in mind, I mean, I know a lot of you are nonprofits and you're like, okay, that's great, Bart, that's students at a school, it doesn't apply. It actually does apply, because I think peer-to-peer is a major part of our culture now. We go to Yelp to see what restaurant we should go to because we're trusting what other people have experienced there. We really rely on testimonials. We rely on Amazon reviews. We rely so much on those peer-to-peer content because like Lee said, we don't want to hear the corporate speak. We don't want to hear just the official language. We want to experience it through somebody else's eyes. That's what I love about tools like MemoryFox that can collect that for you, because you can go out and you can ask those questions. You can get those stories, and then you can basically say, okay, I've got a story of a donor here. I'm going to use that story and share that story with another set of donors that I want to move to that place. Now you've got peer-to-peer communication going on rather than, another standard appeal letter, which those are good. I'm not saying not to do those, but by integrating content that's peer-to-peer, that's going to give you a whole new level of being able to connect with people and for them to connect with one another. And so don't be afraid of your community connecting with one another. And you might feel like you're out of control with that. Sometimes the best things happen on that level. This next one we have is some of you who might be on social media might recognize Rob. Rob is the dad on That Tall Family. They're very big influencers right now on TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram. We've had him on the podcast a couple of times, and he talks about the importance of utilizing content in social media and how that's made a big difference in their life.
Think of all the content creators that are on campus. And if you could leverage them that are making content already and consuming probably 4 to 6 hours a day of content, if you could leverage them, I mean, the opportunity where it's just going to put the reps in, and at some point, one piece of content can change everything for a university, especially the smaller to mid-sized universities. Again, there's bigger universities and they kind of, they could do whatever and everyone's going to know their name. But this is an opportunity for those medium to small size universities.
So again, it goes back, he's talking a lot about universities, but keep in mind within the network of your nonprofit, do you have influencers? Do you have mommy bloggers? Do you have different people that are, maybe you're related to a church? You've got pastors that are, have a decent sized following. How can you start leveraging some content there? And how can you keep generating content amongst your group of influencers to really, recognize that whether you're a college or whether you're a nonprofit, there's a lot of power in being able to really open up the content creation to beyond just your marketing team, but to kind of then turn it into something that is socialized with everyone. And again, a great reason why MemoryFox, why when I discovered MemoryFox, I was like, man, this is great because I can send out an email and collect a ton of content, a ton of stories, a ton of testimonials, user generated content, and be able to organize that and store it and sort it out and distribute that as I need to. So love that. And I think this is a really good point on this. The final person that I'm going to show you here is Walter Kimbrough. He's the former president of Dillard University in New Orleans. And I think I have somebody from New Orleans here. I think I saw that in the chat. But Dr. Kimbrough has also been featured on Malcolm Gladwell's podcast and several other places, but he has he's also known as the hip hop prez because he has been doing social media for many years in his higher ed career. And so he's talking a little bit about how he utilizes content on social media.
One of the things that helped is that as major mainstream media companies started to make it easy for you to amplify your stories via social media, it made sense to be able to have an access to, Facebook and the Twitter and now the LinkedIn. So if there's a great story about the institution, all I have to do is go on and click, and then I've amplified that story for free. So that, I think part of that for me was seeing how those news sites started to change, and they had the little Twitter icon on there, and it was like, all I have to do is point and click, and now I'm telling other people about what's happening here. So a lot of this is just being practical.
So I love his pragmatism, is the fact that, he realizes that I have influence as president of my organization. If I go to Twitter, if I go to LinkedIn, if I go to Facebook, and personally right now, if your president isn't there, or your executive director, or whomever is the leader who is seen in the community as a person that when they talk, people are going to listen to them, they have some authority, get them on Facebook, get them some social media training, and do what Dr. Kimbrough has done, where it's like, hey, I'm going to amplify the stories of our organization. I'm going to amplify what's going on. They don't have to do dances on TikTok, but just get them to the point where they can start getting that content, leveraging those tools that are out there for free. Because all of a sudden you can put together a strategy to say, okay, we're going to get his account set up or her account set up. We're going to make sure that she is posting these days and she's saying these things. These are the stories that we're going to have her share because we've collected them, and we're going to have her amplify these stories. Video is a great format in all these platforms. And then also LinkedIn is a huge platform because it's still the Wild West on LinkedIn. They're not charging you to, amplify your post. They're not charging you to boost it. It's still pretty much a place where you can kind of get some quick wins really, really well. I've seen that happen last year where people went from 0 to 10,000 followers just because they're putting in the reps of doing something every day, telling stories every day, leading with a voice of authority every day. So again, keep in mind, there's a lot of content. There's content that you're going to have on your website, those blogs we talked about. There's content you're going to have, captured in videos from people, your constituents. And then there's going to be just the amplification of content that you're going to do via social media and other places. So kind of as we kind of finish up here, good marketing makes the company look smart. Great marketing makes the customer feel smart. So again, that's the type of thing we're wanting them to be the hero. So here are a few suggestions for this year. Develop a strategy. We've talked about that already with the idea of the pizza and the 50 questions. So figure out who your audiences are, figure out where they're at, determine the format that's going to be best for them, whether it's print, whether it's digital, whether it's social media. Organize your content and stories and create a calendar and get to work. You need to collect those stories, build a story vault. We've talked a lot about MemoryFox today. If you even want to just start with getting a Google Sheet or Google Drive and start collecting those things, build a place that you can store that, have a story vault. I love this quote from Arabian Nights. People need stories more than bread itself. They tell us how to live and why. So make sure you're collecting those stories and that you've got a really efficient way to be able to organize that. And again, I can't speak highly enough of MemoryFox. And I discovered MemoryFox because I was trying to find something. They check the boxes on everything that I think that a lot of organizations need. Identify your audience's preferences. Again, it goes back to figuring out who they are. Each platform, whether you're doing social media, whether you're doing blogs, whatever you're doing, it has a unique niche for your audience. So whether it's prospective students, donors, whatever, don't share the same content on all your platforms, make it unique sometimes, but collect the stories per the different audiences. Recruit people that are in your influencer world. So whether you've got volunteers, whether you've got students, whether you've got board members or donors, find out how you can, get them to tell their story, how you can pull those things, record video testimonials from all these stakeholders and store them in your vault. And then get buy-in for experimentation. Some of you might come to this and say, hey, we heard this guy today on this MemoryFox, webinar, and he suggested that our president get on TikTok and do dances. I didn't say that, but if you want to go and say, hey, let's get on TikTok, make sure your cabinet and your board understand that getting and growing and moving on, especially adopting new technology, making investments in content marketing, it's going to be beyond some of their comfort zone. They might come from a traditional background where, hey, we do direct mail, we do billboards, that's all we do. You need to kind of start building the buy-in, and maybe that's recruiting younger board members. Maybe it's recruiting other people to influencers into those decision makers. But you still have to have you need to prime that pump so that you can get the stories that you need. You need to educate them and really have them be willing to let you experiment and try some new things. And then be willing to pivot quickly. So sometimes when we get into these new things, we might try something and it doesn't work the way we want to. Learn to pivot, kind of that Alvin Toffler thing that we talked about at the beginning. Pay attention to the trends, pay attention to what's going on, the opportunities. If it's not working, try something else. Don't throw everything out just because one thing didn't work. Be ready to try different stories and how to engage things differently. And then finally here, answer the questions in your content. So it goes back to, that idea that we had. Everybody has questions. Figure out how you can get those questions answered through blogs, through content, through social media, through videos, whatever it is. Always start with wonder what people are going to ask. How can I show that through these stories? So just a couple final thoughts. This is a video from the Drew Barrymore show with Gary Vee. Oh, I'm not sure I have audio on that.
CNBC reports that Mark Zuckerberg has come out strongly against mindless scrolling. He recently said if you're just looking at social media to consume instead of connect with people, you're not getting the positive benefits of social media. Gary, Ross, what should we take from this? My first feeling was that of rebellion, like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg, you're the one who started all of this.
Yeah.
And then I really thought about like what he was saying about connection.
Yeah.
And that's how Facebook was sort of built, and it matriculated into this global phenomenon that sort of took over everything. Steve Jobs, when he built the iPhone, probably didn't think we'd all be doing this, like.
I think he did.
You think he did? You think he knew?
Yeah, I think, I grew up in that era of Silicon Valley, and I think a lot of people don't realize what was really going on through a lot of innovators' mind. They understood behavior. But a lot of these things take time. When I hear Mark say that, I have a lot of empathy for where he's going. But I don't think any of us, not Steve, not Mark, not anyone, should tell people what they should be doing, because people aren't going to listen anyway. Right? The reality is what people do on TikTok or Reels or YouTube Shorts, they're consuming entertainment. That's like watching television or going through a magazine.
Yeah.
That's escapism. He's right. That's not social networking. That's content networking. And that's fine. There's a time and place to watch this show, to go through your feed, to read a magazine. And there's also an opportunity in that environment to connect and have meaningful relationships. You saw some of my content on Instagram. You messaged, I messaged, it created a relationship. It did.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
hence the social part of
correct.
social media, right?
Social media is just a term we call it, right? Like that doesn't mean anything to me. And what it is there's content, and there's the ability with content to create connection. I think it's an option of and, not or.
So I love the way that he ends that, the idea that our content is not necessarily just to give more noise to the world. It's to actually build relationships and create relationships. And for us, as higher ed marketers, nonprofit marketers, those relationships end up going a lot deeper and really impacting the world around us through either education or through the social services that we're providing. So just a couple more quotes here. Now, if you truly understand how marketing works today, you know that there's no individual 6-month campaign. There's only the 365-day campaign during which you produce new content daily. So there's a slide I skipped over. You can go back and look at it. It's kind of Gary Vee's model on how to create content. It'll be in the deck if you want to look at that. But just keep in mind, build a content machine with a story vault, because that's going to be your fuel tank to do a ton of stuff with your marketing. So just a couple resources here for you. We have a blog, as I've referenced, in an email newsletter each week. If you want to be on that newsletter, we produce, the same kind of content that I'm doing today. We do a podcast and a blog every week, and that gets, distributed in the email. I know Troy and I would love to hear from you. If you have ideas for the podcast, let us know on that. And I just talked about the podcast. There it is right there. You can look at that. And so I'll open it up for a couple questions. I know, Celine, you have a couple things you want to finish up with. So I really appreciate the time, everybody.
Thank you, Bart. So Carly, and feel free to come off mute, or I will read your question if you drop them in the chat. So Bart, we have a great question from Carly. What are your thoughts on having different people at your organization answer different questions? So thinking through a blog, for example.
I think that's a great idea. I think that as long as you can stay in agreement from a editorial calendar standpoint or a macro content level, the last thing I want to do is have somebody answer a question that, somebody asked last week why our front door was purple. Well, that's kind of irrelevant. It's not going to play into moving the goals of your organization. So, but if you have that standard idea of all those different questions, I think it is good to have different voices breathing into that and having representation, especially from a DEI standpoint, being able to have different people answer those questions. Because the last thing that anybody wants is just one voice, one representation answering everything. So I think it's a great idea.
And we have another one from Jenny. Can you riff on your content process? How do you plan and get ahead?
It's a great question, Jenny, because I think that's one of the challenges of doing anything like this. So I'll give you two examples. One on the blog, like I said, 8 years ago when I started writing the blog, I had an assistant and she kept saying, "Hey, get that blog post out this week. Get that blog post out this week." You wanted to do it every week. And it was killing me. And finally, I was able to hire some, everything in my business is all subcontracted. I just use freelancers. So I found 2 or 3 freelancers that, I had them read what I had written. I'd met with them so that they could kind of take in the way I think. We did the editorial calendar where we plan out 6 months of blog posts, in a setting. They've gotten to the point now where they might email me and say, "Hey, Bart, you mentioned this about Chat GPT. Can you record a quick video and just give me 5 minutes of points you want to talk about?" So I'll turn Loom on. I'll do a couple, points in a video that's just off the top of my head, send it to them. They transcribe it. That becomes their outline. They go to town. We then have a process that we have an assistant that kind of puts it into, it's all done in Google Sheets and Google Docs so we can collaborate. Once it gets approved, they give me 3 choices of the image. I choose one. I review everything. We've got a proofreader. It gets put into WordPress. It gets scheduled. We use some tools to automatically publish it out, through the computer to different social networks, and the timing's all set up. So I use a lot of automation. And then on the podcast, the trick there, we use a lot of similar automation, but Troy and I get to the point where we have carved out Friday afternoons from like 1 to 5 as the time that we record. Most of our guests are free during that time. We do our pre-interviews and we do our recordings during that time. And we rely on external groups to help us with the production. I mean, Troy and I are great guests, but I'm not sure I could, edit content and do everything that the team does. And so it's an investment, but sometimes those investments free up time, whether it's an investment in automating something on the computer or whether it's an investment in an external firm doing something, that frees up time for me to focus on other things like business development or relationship building that I can't hire out. So I hope that answers your question, Jenny.
Well, thank you, Bart. Thank you. And is there anything that you want to say just to wrap us up with? I know
I really appreciate the time today. It's been great. And obviously there's my contact information. Feel free to email me if you have follow-up questions. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Just a lot of different things that I'm more than happy to sit down and talk with anyone.
Well, thank you, Bart. And I just pulled Carly on the stage. So Carly, if you want to just quickly introduce yourself. Carly is new to the MemoryFox team, and take it away, Carly, wrap us up.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to our first webinar of 2023. Bart, it's been so nice to have you. I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time, so I'm glad that it's done. We did it. Okay, so just wanted to quickly introduce myself. I am the new marketing manager here at MemoryFox, and one thing we really want to prioritize this year is, just like Bart was saying, getting some feedback from all of you. So if you do have any feedback, any questions, maybe any topic suggestions, or just overall stories to share with us, I would love it if you would please go to that link or scan that QR code, and you can see how MemoryFox works when you do that. And we'll take your feedback and we'll use it for future webinars and stuff. Oh, I see Bart's pulling up his phone right now. So.
I am.
Yeah, take out your phone, do that for us. But thank you again, a huge thank you to Bart, and thank you to all of you for being part of this and being a part of our MemoryFox community. We are here to help and serve you and help you be better storytellers and get your mission and scale it across your community and organization. So thank you and happy Tuesday. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. We appreciate you for being with us today. Have a